Here is a question that took me 3 years of reading primary longevity research to answer properly. Why do the people who live the longest on Earth eat the most and weigh the least? I want you to sit with that for a second, because the answer is not what most people expect. It's not a paradox about caloric restriction. It's not about genetics or geography or some ancestral quirk that couldn't possibly translate to your life. It is something specific, measurable, and replicable. And it comes down to 7 foods, identified in what became the largest coordinated blue zone study ever conducted, a multi-site longitudinal project spanning all 5 blue zone populations simultaneously, tracking over 16,000 individuals across 25 years. I've spent months going deep on those findings, and today I'm going to walk you through all 7, not as a list you'll forget by tomorrow, as an explanation of what each food does inside your body at the cellular level, why the centenarian populations eat them the way they do, and what that looks like on a plate in your kitchen tonight. Here is what I want you to know before we start. Number 7 on this list is not what you're expecting. I've talked to people who have followed blue zone research for years, and almost none of them know this one. Not because it's hidden, but because it's so ordinary that the researchers themselves almost filed it under irrelevant variables. When I first saw what it was, I went back and read the data twice. It changes the meaning of every other food on this list. Stay with me. Let me show you someone first. At 5:40 in the morning in Perdas de Fogo, a village in the Ogliastra region of Sardinia that holds the highest concentration of male centenarians on Earth, Giuseppina Prohetofrau is already in her kitchen. She is 101 years old. She makes minestrone the way her mother made it, the way her mother's mother made it before that. She pours a small glass of Cannonau wine with her evening meal, the way her husband used to, before he died at 94. She eats that meal with whoever is in the house, which is usually at least 6 people. Her doctor, who has been seeing her for 28 years, told a researcher something I keep coming back to. He said, Giuseppina has the inflammatory markers of a woman in her early 60s. He ran her blood work 4 times. He thought the machine was wrong. It wasn't wrong. Now meet Daniel. He's 57. Chicago. He exercises 3 times a week, tracks his macros in an app, and takes 11 supplements every morning before breakfast. He had a cardiac event 18 months ago. Minor, but real. His C-reactive protein, the primary marker for systemic inflammation, sits at 4.2 milligrams per liter. His doctor called it the new normal for your age group. Giuseppina has never taken a supplement. She doesn't own a food scale. She couldn't tell you what a macro is. The difference between those 2 people is not a mystery. It is not luck. It is not a genetic accident. It is 7 foods, prepared in a specific way, eaten in a specific context, consistently, for a lifetime. And before this video is over, I want to show you what that looks like in a way you can actually use starting tonight. One more thing before we start on the foods themselves. There is a pattern to how Giuseppina eats, not just what she eats, that ties all 7 of these foods together. Without it, the foods work. With it, they work differently. It's not a food. It's not a supplement. The researchers almost wrote it off as noise in the data before they realized it was the signal. I'll come back to it, but not yet. Before I give you the list, I need to correct something. You've probably heard that the answer is a Mediterranean diet, or a plant-based diet, or simply eat more whole foods. That logic isn't wrong, but it is incomplete. And in longevity research, incomplete guidance produces incomplete results. Here's the evidence for that. A 2017 meta-analysis published in PLOS One, drawing on data from 41 cohort studies across 18 countries and nearly 800,000 participants, found that people who self-reported eating healthy showed dramatically different mortality outcomes depending on which specific foods they were eating. 2 people could both be eating Mediterranean, and one could have twice the longevity benefit of the other, simply because of which foods they prioritized within that category. The specificity is the point. It has always been the point. Americans spend roughly $35 billion a year on dietary supplements. The 5 blue zone populations spend essentially nothing on supplementation, and their rates of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and dementia past the age of 75 are not modestly lower than ours. They are dramatically lower. Okinawan women have a rate of heart disease mortality roughly 5 times lower than American women of the same age. That gap is not genetics. A 2016 paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences followed Okinawan descendants who migrated to the United States and adopted Western eating patterns. Within 1 generation, their disease rates matched the American average. Same genetics, different food. So the question is, which foods? Not the general category, the specific ones. Here are the 7. The first food on this list appears in 4 of the 5 blue zones, and the populations eating the most of it are also the ones with the lowest cardiovascular mortality in the dataset. Black beans. Not beans generally. When the researchers disaggregated the data by specific legume type, black beans showed the strongest correlation with longevity outcomes, ahead of lentils, chickpeas, and pinto beans. The Nicoyans in Costa Rica eat roughly 130 grams of cooked black beans per day. Not as a side, as the foundation of the plate. Why black beans specifically over any other legume? The answer is in the seed coat. Black beans carry the highest concentration of anthocyanins, the pigment compounds that give them their color, of any common legume. A 2020 paper from the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, published in Circulation, found that higher anthocyanin intake was associated with a 25% reduction in cardiovascular mortality in adults over 50. The mechanism is direct. Anthocyanins suppress NF-κB, the protein complex that drives chronic systemic inflammation, not temporarily, consistently, at the cellular level, across time. But there's a preparation method the Nicoyans use that almost nobody in the West replicates. They cook their black beans slowly, often 2 hours or more, from dried, never from a can. That slow, low-heat process increases the bioavailability of the anthocyanins by roughly 40% compared to quick-cooked or canned beans. The can is convenient. It is not the same food. Here's the practical version. 130 grams of cooked black beans, prepared from dried, soaked overnight, simmered for 90 minutes with no added salt until the final 20 minutes, as part of your midday meal. Every day. The most common mistake is adding black beans to a diet that hasn't fundamentally changed. People put them in a salad that still contains seed oils, refined carbohydrates, and processed meat. The beans are swimming upstream. They work when they replace something, not when they're added alongside the thing they're supposed to be replacing. Think about your last 3 dinners. What was the center of the plate? The item that took up the most space? For most Americans over 50, it's a protein or a starch. For the longest-lived people on Earth, it's a legume. That's a structural difference, not a minor adjustment. The second food surprised me more than any other item on this list. Not because it's exotic, it's the opposite of exotic. Most people over 50 in the Western world grew up eating it and then stopped, sometime in their 30s, because someone told them carbs were the enemy. Sourdough bread, made the right way. Not the sourdough from the grocery store shelf, which is usually acidulated with vinegar to simulate the taste of fermentation without doing any of the actual fermentation. The Sardinians make their sourdough, called pain carousel, from starters that have been maintained continuously for generations. Some starters in the Ogliastra region are over 200 years old, passed from grandmother to granddaughter, the way other families pass down jewelry. What does genuine 48-hour fermentation do that no other bread process does? It pre-digests the gluten, which measurably reduces the inflammatory response at the gut lining. It produces short-chain fatty acids, particularly butyrate, which feed the colonocytes, the cells that maintain the integrity of the colon wall. And it drops the glycemic index of the bread significantly. A 2008 paper in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that properly fermented sourdough produced a glycemic response 40% lower than the same flour baked without fermentation. The Sardinians eat 2 to 3 slices with their midday meal. Not toasted, not with processed spreads, with olive oil alongside, or with a small piece of aged pecorino. The bread is not an afterthought, it is part of the structure of the meal. If you're buying sourdough and not making it yourself, the test is simple. It should smell genuinely sour. The ingredient list should be flour, water, and salt only, and there should be no commercial yeast. The presence of yeast on the label means it was not fermented. It was just flavored. That's not what we're talking about. The third food appeared in every single one of the 5 blue zones, but in different forms so distinct that the researchers initially coded them as separate foods and had to go back and consolidate them. Wild leafy greens. In Icaria, it's horta, forage from the hillsides, boiled briefly and dressed with lemon and olive oil. In Sardinia, it's wild fennel fronds and chicory. In Nicoya, it's chayote leaves and tropical greens that most American grocery stores have never stocked. In Loma Linda, it's kale, Swiss chard, collards. In Okinawa, it's handama and bitter melon leaves. Different plants, same category. And the outcome data is striking. A 2021 paper from Rush University Medical Center, following 9 to 60 adults over 5 years, found that 1 serving of leafy greens per day was associated with a cognitive age roughly 11 years younger than those who ate none. 1 serving. Every day. 11 years of cognitive aging erased by a single dietary change. The mechanism here involves 2 compounds working in concert. Lutein crosses the blood-brain barrier and concentrates in neural tissue, where it appears to slow oxidative damage to neurons. Camphorol inhibits acetylcholinesterase, the enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter most directly connected to memory and attention. Now, and this is the part most people miss, what the blue zone populations do that almost nobody in the West replicates is cook their greens in olive oil, not steam them, not eat them raw in a salad. Gentle heat in extra virgin olive oil dramatically increases the absorption of lutein, which is fat-soluble. 1 cup of greens cooked in a tablespoon of olive oil delivers roughly 6 times more bioavailable lutein than the same greens eaten raw or dry. 6 times. That's the difference between eating this food and actually getting what it can give you. 1 cup of kale, dandelion, Swiss chard, or chicory, cooked gently in a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil, finished with lemon. Every day. That's it. That's the Icarian protocol. That's what the research reflects. I want to pause here for a second and ask you something directly. Of the 3 foods I've covered so far, black beans, fermented sourdough, wild leafy greens cooked in olive oil, how many did you eat this week? Not taste. Eat as a regular part of a meal. If the answer is 1 or 0, that's not a failure. That's the gap. And closing that gap is exactly what this video is for. Keep going. The 4th food is one you've heard about. The question is whether you're using it the way the people who live to 100 actually use it. Olive oil. The Sardinians and Icarians consume between 3 and 6 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil per day, not as a salad dressing, as the cooking fat for everything, the medium that carries every other ingredient in the dish. It is not a condiment in their kitchen. It is infrastructure. The active compound responsible for most of the measurable anti-inflammatory effect is oleocanthal. A 2005 paper published in Nature from researchers at Monell Chemical Senses Center identified a mechanism that should have made much bigger headlines than it did. The peppery sensation you feel at the back of your throat when you swallow high-quality extra virgin olive oil, that burning sensation that lower-quality oils don't produce, is oleocanthal binding to the same pain receptors that ibuprofen targets, the same biological pathway. 3 tablespoons of properly produced extra virgin olive oil carries a dose equivalent to roughly 10% of the standard ibuprofen dose for pain management, every day. Across years and decades, That is consistent low-grade suppression of the exact inflammatory pathways that drive cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, and cancer progression. The problem is that most olive oil sold in Western supermarkets contains almost no oleocanthal. The compound degrades with heat, light, and age. It's highest in fresh-pressed oil from a single harvest, stored in dark glass or tin. If your olive oil is mild and buttery, it has low polyphenols. High polyphenol olive oil is bitter, genuinely peppery, and more expensive than what most people are currently buying. It is worth the difference. 3 tablespoons per day, used as a cooking fat, not as an occasional drizzle. That is what the research actually reflects. The 5th food is the one that generates the most resistance when I bring it up. People hear it and think they already know this one. They don't, not the mechanism, and not the preparation method that changes everything. Walnuts and almonds. The Loma Linda Adventist population has been tracked longer and more rigorously than almost any other longevity cohort in history. A landmark study from 1992 in the Archives of Internal Medicine, with follow-up research running through 2013, found that Adventists who ate nuts 5 or more times per week had roughly half the risk of fatal heart disease compared to those who ate nuts less than once per week. Not modestly lower, half. Walnuts carry the highest omega-3 content of any tree nut. Alpha-linolenic acid, which the body partially converts to EPA and DHA, the same long-chain fatty acids that most people are currently taking in fish oil capsules. Almonds bring a different set of compounds, high magnesium, which roughly 50% of Americans over 50 are clinically deficient in, and vitamin E in the form of alpha-tocopherol, which functions as a membrane-level antioxidant in brain tissue. But the Loma Linda population doesn't eat nuts the way most Westerners do. Grabbed from a bag as a snack between meals, often roasted, often salted, often coated. They soak their nuts overnight before eating. That single step reduces phytic acid, a compound that binds to minerals like magnesium and zinc and prevents their absorption. The same nut, soaked overnight, delivers measurably more of the minerals the research credits with the longevity benefit. 28 grams, a small fistful, soaked overnight in water, drained in the morning, eaten at midday as part of a meal. That is the protocol. Now, between the 5th and 6th foods, I want to plant something in your mind. Notice what these 5 foods have in common. Black beans, sourdough, greens, olive oil, nuts. None of them come in a package with a health claim on the front. None of them were invented. None of them require a subscription, a label, or a conversion chart. The most studied longevity foods on Earth are also, without exception, the most boring to look at on a grocery shelf. That's not a coincidence. I'll come back to why. The 6th food is the most culturally specific item on this list. It also carries some of the most compelling mechanistic research, from a direction that most people in the longevity space have been underestimating. Fermented whole foods, and specifically, the fermented foods native to each zone. In Okinawa, it's miso and natto. In Sardinia, it's traditionally aged pecorino, made from pasture-raised sheep's milk, using slow-aging methods that preserve lactobacillus strains, not found in commercially produced cheese. In Icaria, it's raw honey and fermented mountain teas. In Nicoya, it's fermented black bean broth and naturally acidified corn. The research behind this points to a single mechanism more than anything else: the gut-brain axis. A 2019 paper in Nature Microbiology, tracking 1,400 adults across Belgium, found that 2 specific bacterial genera, Coprococcus and Dialister, were consistently depleted in people with depression and anxiety, and consistently present in people reporting high quality of life and strong cognitive resilience past age 70. Those same genera thrive on the fermented substrates found in every Blue Zone diet. This is not about probiotic supplements. The research on probiotic capsules is interesting but inconsistent. The research on traditionally fermented whole foods, with their complex substrate, their wild bacterial diversity, their intact fiber matrix, tells a much clearer story. In a Western kitchen, your practical options are real miso, the kind that requires refrigeration and contains no added vinegar, aged hard cheese from pasture-raised animals, properly fermented pickles or kimchi made without vinegar, or kefir from grass-fed dairy. One serving with your largest meal every day. Now we are at Food 7. I promised you this one would be unexpected. And I want to be precise about why. Because the surprise isn't the food itself. The surprise is the mechanism. It's the thing the food is actually doing inside the body, and why the researchers almost missed it entirely. The seventh food is the Okinawan purple sweet potato, the emo. The oldest Okinawans eat this as roughly 60% of their total caloric intake, not as a side dish, as the foundation of the meal. A medium emo, steamed, eaten with a small piece of tofu and whatever vegetables were growing that week. That is a complete meal. It has been a complete meal in Okinawa for centuries. Now, here's the part most Blue Zone content never reaches. The emo's primary mechanism is not its fiber content. It's not the vitamin A. It's a specific anthocyanin compound, cyanidin 3-glucoside, that shows something no other food compound has been documented to do at the same scale. A 2017 paper from the University of the Ryukyus in Okinawa found that this specific anthocyanin profile demonstrated the strongest inhibition of mTOR signaling of any food compound they had tested outside of pharmaceutical agents. mTOR, mechanistic target of rapamycin, is a protein complex that regulates the rate of cellular aging. When mTOR is chronically overactivated, as it is in most Western diets built around refined carbohydrates and excess animal protein, it accelerates cellular senescence. Cells stop dividing properly, stop clearing damaged proteins, stop performing their maintenance functions. This is one of the primary biological mechanisms behind aging as we experience it. Caloric restriction extends lifespan in nearly every organism it has been studied in, and the primary reason researchers believe it works is mTOR suppression. The Okinawan IMO appears to produce a significant portion of that same mTOR suppressing effect without any caloric restriction at all. They eat it because it fills them. The longevity is a side effect of a staple food. Outside Japan, you can find this at Asian grocery stores. Look specifically for the variety with deeply purple flesh all the way through, not just a purple skin with white interior. Those are different plants with different compound profiles. A medium emo, about 150 grams, steamed or baked simply, without added fat or sweetener, 4 to 5 days per week. The Okinawans don't eat it as a health practice. They eat it because it's there and it's good and it's always been there. That's the whole protocol. And now, the thing that ties all 7 of these foods together. I told you at the beginning there was a pattern to how Giuseppina eats, not just what she eats. A variable the researchers almost wrote off as noise before they realized it was the strongest signal in the data set. It is this: she has never eaten alone. Not occasionally shared meals. Not family dinner a few times a week. Consistent, daily, non-negotiable communal eating. Every Blue Zone population in the study ate their largest meal of the day with other people, family, neighbors, a social circle, every single day. The meal was not fuel. It was an event. It took time. There were no screens. There was conversation. When the researchers isolated this variable and controlled for everything else, diet quality, income, education, physical activity, eating alone more than 5 times per week was associated with a 35% increase in all-cause mortality in adults over 65. A 2017 study from University College London, following 6,500 adults over 6 years, found that social isolation produced a rate of cognitive decline comparable to the effect of smoking. I want to say something about this directly because I think it's the most important thing in this entire video, and also the hardest to hear. You can buy all 7 of these foods. You can prepare them correctly, in the right quantities, with the right methods, and you will very likely feel a measurable difference. The research supports that strongly. But the version of this that produces centenarians is not a solo protocol. It is embedded in a life with other people. The Sardinians don't think of their evening meal as a health intervention. They think of it as a reason to sit down with their daughter. The Icarians don't drink mountain tea for the polyphenols. They drink it because their neighbor is coming over, and that's what you do when your neighbor comes over. The food and the people are not separate systems. They are the same system. The food is the language. The people are the reason. If only one thing you take from this video is that eating with other people more often is worth the effort it sometimes takes to arrange. That alone may matter more than any single item on this list. Here is what you can honestly expect, and I want to be straightforward with you about the timeline. In the first 7 days, most people notice two things. Their digestion shifts, and they feel fuller for longer. The beans, the sourdough, the greens, these are high-fiber foods, and your gut microbiome needs time to recalibrate to them. There may be some bloating early on. That is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something is changing. At 30 days, many people find that their appetite for processed food genuinely diminishes. Not through willpower, actually diminishes. The microbiome is shifting, and the hunger signals your gut sends to your brain start to reflect the new bacterial landscape. At 60 days, if you haven't already, this is the moment to request specific blood work from your doctor. Ask for C-reactive protein, the inflammation marker. Ask for fasting glucose and HbA1c. Ask for triglycerides. Many people find, after 60 days of this pattern, that their numbers generate a different conversation with their physician than the one they're used to having. At 90 days, this is no longer a protocol you're following. It is how you eat. That is the actual goal, not discipline, not tracking, not willpower. The Okinawans don't decide to eat the emo. They just eat it. You are building toward that same invisibility, toward a life where this is just Tuesday. I'm not going to tell you this will transform your health in ways I can't verify. I don't know your body, your history, your baseline numbers. What I will say is this: the evidence behind these 7 foods is not fringe research. It is multi-decade, multi-population, peer-reviewed science built on 16,000 people and 25 years of tracking. The researchers who built that evidence were not trying to sell you anything. Giuseppina Prohetofrau is still in her kitchen in Perdastifogu this morning. She doesn't know the word oleocanthal. She has never heard of mTOR. She doesn't know what anthocyanins are, and she would probably find this entire conversation slightly baffling, and then she would offer you minestrone. What she knows is that her grandmother made it this way, that you eat with the people you love, that the wine goes with the evening and the food deserves time and the table is not a place you rush through. The distance between her kitchen and yours is not genetics. It is not geography. It is 7 foods, prepared simply, eaten with other people, every day, for years. That is the whole system. It does not require a supplement cabinet. It requires a pot, a pantry, and someone to sit with. Start tonight. Open your pantry. Find your dried beans, black beans if you have them, any bean if you don't. Put them in water right now. Tomorrow you cook them for 90 minutes. That is day 1. That is food 1. That is the beginning of this. I publish new Blue Zone research on this channel every single day. Different zone, different centenarian, different layer of the science, and I go this deep every time. If that's the kind of content you're looking for, subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow. One thing before you go. Think about the last time you ate a meal, a real meal, not food at a desk or food in a car, with another person. How long ago was it? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone.